Hi, everyone. It's Marina Kukla here to discuss cognitive behavioral therapy for work success, CBTw session 2. Just some things to think about. By now, you've had some participants, hopefully many veterans who were able to attend the first session. The second session, similarly, is focused on continuing to engage folks and to bring anyone into the fold who hopefully was able to attend session 2, who may not have been able to attend session 1. And I'll have a little bit to say about that here in a minute. But right now, I'm sharing my manual to walk you through this session 2 and some considerations here. So the first step is our introductory elements that we'll have in our sessions 2 through 12. The first introductory element, of course, is the work check-in. This is when every single person present goes ahead and tells us what's going on, what their update is for them in work. It could be anything from had a job interview, applied for a job, met with my vocational counselor, thought about a job, updated my resume, um, to got a job or in the hiring process. It could be a million different things, but each person goes around and says what their update is. For veterans who may not have had the opportunity or chose not to share during session 1, this would be a good place to ask them about their work goals if that's not already clear to you and they haven't brought that forth. The second introductory element is the homework review or the take-home review. Now, we don't have a formal take-home for session 1, but in many cases, we end up assigning one. Sometimes it's the last narrative, the meaning and values linked to work narrative, or perhaps something else. And so this would be another point at which people in the group would have an opportunity to share that if they wanted. Otherwise, the third and last introductory element is the agenda. We have a very brief 1 bullet point agenda here that we're going to learn about the cognitive behavioral model and how it impacts you in your work success. And so what we're really doing this week is defining the elements of CBT, what they are, and how they work together to impact us. And so we start with thoughts here, and we have thoughts, feelings, and behavior here on page 12. This might be a good opportunity to invite veterans to read this section. Otherwise, you can read it, but I like to do that. I also like to do that to help build rapport, especially if some people haven't shared a lot or talked a lot about themselves in the group, but maybe they would be willing to read. Otherwise, you can read it yourself or have anyone do that. So we're going through each of these 3 elements. Then on page 13, we have sort of this cookie cutter feelings list, which some people do like. I don't spend a lot of time going through this. It's just something that we have there that can be of use to some people and not others. Then we have really the key on page 14. What does CBT mean? And so again, we have this sort of educational portion here. It would be helpful to have veterans go ahead and read that, or we can read through that ourselves. And then we talk about how these 3 elements fit together into a full cycle. And we have 2 examples here on the bottom of 14. The negative cycle, if you wake up thinking my day's ruined, if you're running late to work and you wake up thinking, oh my gosh, my day's ruined, what's the point of doing anything? My supervisor is going to think I'm lazy and stupid. They're just going to think bad thoughts about me even more, and people are going to talk about me, or they're going to look down on me. Then, of course, how are you going to feel? Hopeless, defeated, discouraged, maybe angry, and you're going to go back to bed because what's the point of doing any of that? And then we see, on the other hand, conversely, the positive cycle. You wake up late and you think, crap, I'm going to learn from what went wrong, and so I don't do this again. I'm going to set 2 alarms instead of 1. I'm gonna fix this. And we've all been there, and we've made that mistake, or we've kind of messed up, or something hasn't gone our way, and we have to think, how can I prevent this? Even though I'm late, the important thing is just to get there. Very adaptive thought. I messed up. It's not the end of the world. I'm going to be okay. And you're going to feel more determined, optimistic, solution focused. Maybe you don't feel great, but you still go ahead and get to work. You call your supervisor, you tell them that you're going to be late, and you maintain that job. So instead of losing your job, being fired, or experiencing that job loss, you can kind of keep that job, and you may suffer some consequences, but you're still moving forward in a positive way. And then we have a little bit more education here on the top of 15. Notice that the situation was the same for both the negative and positive cycle, but in each cycle, the way our perspectives on it, the way we viewed it, the way we thought about it, that's what made all the difference in the world regarding the ultimate outcome. It changed how we felt, it changed our behaviors, and it led to either a better or worse outcome. Then we have a couple of more examples here on 15 of how this works. The idea, again, is just to demonstrate to the veterans in group, how does this stuff work? We're talking about CBT. This is why you should care about it. This is why it affects you. So here are some examples of how it can work, both positively and negatively. Then we ask on the bottom of 15 a question to think about and discuss. What do you notice about these cycles? What makes them differ? This is just having a conversation explicitly about how these are the same or different, and also further drawing out this idea that how we view things and how we think about things really changes what happens to us, how we behave, and how we feel about ourselves and the world, and in this case, about work. So this would be a short discussion amongst the group. There are some lines here if people want to jot down notes, but this is generally a let's discuss it together section. Now we have some more examples here of the full model and how it works together in different scenarios. The first scenario on 16, you start looking for a job, you haven't worked in a while. This is a common one, as we all know. And so this is why we use this one, because this one comes up time and time again in each group we do, and for each veteran we work with, and trying to help them get a job and meet their employment goals. So we have this example here, and you would go through this as a group. You could have veterans read out loud, or you could read it out loud, but we go through it sort of step by step, and we can just kind of leave it as is, read through it. We don't have to kind of keep going over it. We can kind of stick with what the material is here. And same thing with scenario 2. We can all relate to this. After putting in a job application, the employer calls and asks you to submit to the background check. Thoughts: no one will hire me because I have a felony. Maybe it's better for me to just quit now than be humiliated by not passing this background check and failing yet again, or feeling like shit because I failed yet again. You feel frustration, resentment, fear, maybe avoidance. And so that's our behavior. You don't call that potential employer back who asked for the background check, so you don't get the job because you wanted to avoid it rather than experience that failure and all that stuff that comes with it. We have another separate scenario on page 18. Again, the idea with these scenarios and these examples is to show veterans how this CBT model works in their lives and in the real world. So your boss gets on you for messing up the inventory yesterday. You could think, I'm such an idiot, I always screw up. Now I can't even do basic stuff right. And so I feel worthless, sad, depressed, hopeless maybe. So what do? You say, I can't work anymore. Clearly I can't do basic things. And now I feel humiliated, and my boss and other people are noticing, and I just can't be here. I shouldn't work. I have mental illness. I have cognitive problems, and this isn't worth it. I'm disabled. All of these thoughts then lead you to quit and leave that employment situation that maybe you really liked. Maybe it was really good for you. And we can all think of positive alternatives to that. Maybe you just had a bad day, or you weren't feeling well that day, and you'll do that inventory better the next time. So that would be that positive thought alternative, that change or that answer thought that we would use later on in the intervention. Now on page 19, we actually have them sit down, open their books, and write in there with a pen. And we want them to do that. We want them to come up with at least one example, or two if you have time, and then give them 5 or so minutes, however many minutes. And then when they're done writing, then you would go around and say, who wants to talk about theirs, who would like to share theirs. And it's helpful if you have time for everyone to have an opportunity to do that, even if they don't go through their full example. Maybe they just go through part of it. But by now we've had multiple examples of scenario. What's the scenario? What's the context? What's happened? Then the thoughts, the feelings, the behavior. A lot of people won't get this right away. Totally normal, totally expected. this is where as facilitators, we can help and provide that scaffolding to help them on a very basic level, as basic as we can, understand how these things fit together. Um, so usually that's how we do this one. You could prepare a fillable PDF in advance of examples, but you probably really don't need to because we have multiples of these in this session. So this is where allowing extra time for people to write and be able to share and go around. If people choose not to share, or they just don't speak up, and you say, who wants to share? And a couple people sort of share, we're still trying to engage people. This is only the second session. Some people will still be new to us, and maybe some people didn't speak up last week. So this is where we would say, John, would you like to share yours? Is there anything you wanted to say to the group based on yours? This is where you could directly invite people, and they can always say no, and that's totally fine. But this is where I use that approach to invite people and to make sure, especially doing this virtually, that people have that opportunity and that we're drawing them in and we're engaging them. If it doesn't make sense or they're not following the exercise, that's okay too. Again, still provide that positive reinforcement, like, man, you tried really hard. Maybe you identified a behavior that's been a sticking point for you. It's been kind of difficult for you. Maybe they identified a feeling or a thought. you know Maybe they got one out of these three elements, but they at least got one. So continue to provide that reinforcement and maybe help them work through it if there's that opportunity. There may not be time or opportunity to help people work through it, or maybe you go through one veterans example as a whole group as another demonstration of how to do this. But again, the idea is to show them basically how CBT works as it relates to employment, how it works in their lives, and how this can be useful this is a foundational element of CBTW. They have many weeks, as you know, to practice and learn this further and to solidify this learning. So it doesn't have to all happen in session 2. This is our initial introduction. Then, of course, we have our take home, which is to review the CBT model, check in with yourself, noticing when you're having a negative feeling about work. So we're not asking them to notice negative thoughts yet because we're not quite there. But we ask them to notice when they have a negative feeling and place that scenario into the model. So it could be someone who feels sad or discouraged or frustrated or pissed off because they can't find a job, or their job search is going really slowly, or even building their resume is going slowly. That could be the negative feeling they recognize about work. So that's their scenario. And then try to place it within this model. Write it down in this space here, or just keep it in mind, and we can discuss it next week, of course, during that take-home review. The biggest things are going to be to try to draw everyone in, continue to engage and build rapport, and maybe get those people who haven't shared yet or spoken up at all during group, maybe invite them to do that if they would like. That would be another main key point. If you have people who weren't in session 1 who were in session 2 and you haven't done a catch up, that's fine. Don't feel like you have to. I think if you can establish what their work goals are, you could ask them to share that. If they want to introduce themselves and share that work goal at the very beginning, or why they're in group, or what their goal for group is, then I think that is sufficient for session 1 for people who missed. So, and they can come right into the fold here, and we can continue to do the best we can with them. So I think those are some things to really continue to focus on. If you can make basic reflections, like thought reflections, emotions, behaviors, do that. Remember, don't jump ahead of yourself. We're not to the 4As yet. We're not assessing and answering our thinking yet. We're just at the stage of basic reflections, basic feedback, basic thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So keep it very basic, keep it simple, and then we'll build from here with the following couple sessions, 3 and 4 in particular. Thanks again for watching this. Good luck with session 2, and I hope this was helpful.